Today I want to break down 3 developments that took place this morning, and I think almost everyone will misunderstand them at first glance, which is exactly why they matter. Iran's IRGC released a list of 12 specific Gulf energy facilities it now considers legitimate targets. This includes Samref in Saudi Arabia, Al Hosn in the UAE, Ras Laffan in Qatar, and they even issued evacuation warnings for workers at these sites. At the same time, Donald Trump announced an indefinite extension of the ceasefire and described Iran's government as seriously fractured. Then, in a separate CNBC interview, Trump claimed the United States intercepted a vessel carrying what he called a gift from China, adding that it likely contained things that weren't very nice. He also said he was surprised because he believed he had an understanding with President Xi. Most media outlets will treat this as 3 unrelated headlines. One will say Iran is escalating by naming targets. Another will say Trump is trying to de-escalate by extending the ceasefire. And a third will frame China as being caught supplying materials. 3 separate stories, 3 different narratives, 3 different conclusions. But I want to argue something very different. All 3 interpretations are wrong, because these are not separate events. They are one interconnected system expressing itself in 3 different ways. And more importantly, the real story is not Iran's target list, not Trump's ceasefire decision, and not even the alleged shipment. The real story is China's response to all of it. China responded with just 4 words: opposes any malicious association. That is the entire official statement. No detailed denial, no clarification, no explanation of the ship, no comment on the 12 named energy facilities, including a Qatari LNG terminal where Chinese companies hold long-term contracts. Just 4 words. And those 4 words, I would argue, tell you more about the direction of this conflict than all the other announcements combined. Once you understand what that response is doing strategically, the 3 separate stories collapse into one unified picture. Start with Iran's target list. Naming 12 civilian energy facilities during an active ceasefire is not symbolic. It is not random. It is a message. But importantly, it is not primarily directed at the United States. Washington already understands Iran's military capabilities. It has been engaged with Iran for years and knows its missile, drone, and naval capacity. The real audience is the Gulf states, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the UAE. These are countries that host critical oil and gas infrastructure, financial centers, and American military bases. Iran is signaling that if its territory is used indirectly in the conflict, then the economic infrastructure of the region becomes exposed. In other words, Iran is shifting the burden from military confrontation to economic vulnerability. Facilities like Ras Laffan in Qatar are not symbolic targets. They handle massive volumes of liquefied natural gas that supply Europe and Asia. They are civilian hubs tied directly to global energy stability. When Iran tells workers to evacuate, it is not a rhetorical gesture. It is an escalation into economic infrastructure warfare, which is a completely different category of pressure. And this is where Trump's ceasefire extension becomes important. The extension does not answer the target list. It does not neutralize it. It simply pauses the timeline. But the target list functions like a deadline of its own. It creates pressure on Gulf states that the ceasefire does not resolve. At the same time, internal divisions within Iran matter. The IRGC is not a single unified voice. There are factions that favor negotiation and factions that believe the window for decisive action is closing. The release of a detailed target list during a ceasefire suggests the more aggressive faction is signaling internally that it is ready to escalate if necessary. The ceasefire, therefore, gives both sides inside Iran time, but in different directions. Now we come to what Trump called a gift from China, which Reuters reports contained dual-use chemicals potentially related to ballistic missile production. On CNBC, Trump expressed surprise and said he thought he had an understanding with Xi Jinping. But then he quickly added, "That's the way war goes," almost dismissing the issue. That reaction is not random. It reflects constraint. Trump is aware that escalating directly with China right now is not strategically viable. There is an upcoming high-level summit scheduled for May 14th, where trade and economic frameworks are expected to be discussed. Opening a confrontation over this shipment would risk collapsing that agenda. China, for its part, responds with those 4 words: opposes any malicious association. In diplomatic language, that is not a denial. It is a deflection. It avoids engaging with the facts while rejecting the framing. It is a calculated refusal to escalate before the summit. To understand this better, think of international signaling as structured categories. Full denial is used when a state wants to clearly disprove something. Strong denial is used when engagement might confirm suspicion. Procedural deflection, what we see here, is used when a state wants to avoid confirming or denying because both options carry risk. China chooses the third path, and Trump's shrug mirrors that same logic. Both sides are effectively agreeing not to escalate publicly before May 14th, even though the underlying issue remains unresolved. Now connect this to the target list again. Iran names 12 facilities, including sites tied indirectly to global energy supply chains. China says nothing about those facilities. No concern, no warning, no diplomatic engagement. Silence. That silence matters more than the four-word statement. Because if a country's energy supply is threatened, it usually reacts. China does not, which suggests one of two things. Either China believes Iran will not actually strike those facilities, or China has already secured alternative supply channels that reduce its exposure. Either way, China maintains strategic ambiguity. It does not want to be locked into defending Iran's actions or condemning them. It wants flexibility. This is where the three stories converge. Iran creates pressure through targeted naming. The United States manages escalation through a ceasefire extension. China maintains ambiguity through minimal language. Now let's consider the broader structure. China benefits from prolonged instability in three ways. First, higher energy prices increase the value of its strategic reserves, which include massive stockpiles of Iranian and Russian crude. Second, American military spending increases while Chinese spending remains focused on Asia-Pacific priorities. Third, disruption in Gulf energy flows strengthens China's role as an alternative trading partner in a post-crisis energy system. In practical terms, China does not need to intervene militarily. It simply needs the system to remain unstable long enough for structural leverage to accumulate. Even shipping data reflects this. Official statistics show minimal direct imports from Iran. Yet, Malaysian crude imports into China exceed Malaysia's production capacity. That discrepancy is widely understood in the industry. It suggests indirect supply routes that bypass enforcement mechanisms. Meanwhile, Iran continues exporting at unexpectedly stable levels despite sanctions pressure. That stability is made possible through networks that include ship-to-ship transfers and alternative payment systems. So when Trump says gift from China, Iran names 12 facilities, and China replies with 4 words. They are not separate reactions. They are synchronized signals within a single geopolitical system. Finally, the key question, what does the ceasefire actually change? If it has no fixed end date, it does not create pressure. It removes it. If Iran continues issuing target warnings during that period, it is not deterrence. It is preparation. If China continues to remain silent, it is not neutrality. It is strategic positioning. So the real conclusion is this. All three actors are operating inside the same structure, but none of them are addressing the same layer of it. And that is why reading them separately leads to misunderstanding. The system is not fragmented. It is coordinated. And what happened this morning is not 3 stories. It is one evolving signal about where this conflict is actually heading.